going on, everyone? I'm Jaren, and today we are talking about the Odyssey. After the Trojan War, Odysseus faces a dangerous voyage back to Ithaca, crossing paths with monstrous adversaries and manipulative deities along the way. Writer-director Christopher Nolan returns to the big screen to deliver one of his most highly anticipated, most controversial, nonetheless one of the most talked about movies of the year. And this marks the 13th picture in Christopher Nolan's filmography, and ever since Oppenheimer, the bar has never been higher as far as expectations go. I am definitely a big fan of Nolan, with Inception being one of my favorite films of all time, and seeing how every actor in Hollywood is willing to line up to be in his next project, no matter how small of a role it is, really showcases the passion he has behind his craft. And with a century's worth of various adaptations, Nolan has decided to tackle Homer's iconic text and bring that signature vision to life. Now, before we get into this review, I wanted to quickly address the amount of hate and controversy surrounding the Odyssey prior to its release. Like, it is so sad and pathetic that something like the national news was able to spit out a lot of facts that they to believe that it was right and still get those things wrong because they haven't seen the film yet. Starting off with Christopher Nolan. I mean, the way that he moved on from Warner Brothers to Universal Pictures, there's just a section of the film community that suddenly thinks that his films ain't shit no more. And then there's the discrimination with the roles of Lupita Nyong'o, Elliot Page, and Travis Scott, to where their characters amount to like 20 seconds to 4 minutes of screen time, and none of which derails the immersion of the viewing experience. I also love it that in people's arguments, they can't tell the difference between historical accuracy and literary historical accuracy. You might as well just tell me that Hercules is a true story. Oh man. Yeah, it's fantasy, guys. It's the fucking Odyssey. Magic and monsters. American and UK actors playing Greeks and Romans. Historical accuracy my ass. Whew. Alright, I'm done being pissy. Now, if I'm being 100% honest, I have not read the original source material of the Odyssey. I know, I'm lame. I haven't had the opportunity to cover it in high school like all y'all, but you know, I've been told about this story in fragments, and amongst the many renditions, I was kind of going into this movie blind, and that made me very excited. After seeing this movie for myself, I can honestly say that this was a breathtaking spectacle, a visceral and triumphant experience of epic proportions. And I know that may sound very overblown for a Christopher Nolan feat, but believe me when I tell you that this is the kind of movie that reminds us why going to the theater is supposed to be special. Starting off with the positives, this was a massive technical achievement where Christopher Nolan prefers to work as in-camera and as practically as possible, such as casting thousands of extras for that gargantuan Troy sequence, hiking up a mountain and into an actual cave on location, instead of just relying on CGI or built-in sound stages. And I know that the costume design was one of the first things that people came for in the backlash, but particularly referring to Agamemnon and his men's armor, their shields, and even their helmets, I thought was appropriately stylized to make this particular rendition stand out. Keeping it as grounded as possible, they just decided not to cast any actors to portray the gods. For example, when it came to expressing the presence of Zeus, you have your thunder and lightning. For Poseidon, you have your winds and the ocean. Even when they go to the underworld, I thought that sequence was a rather captivating liberty that I was completely on board for. In various interviews, Christopher Nolan has expressed interest in eventually tackling the horror genre, and as you've seen in his previous work, he's always kind of just nipped it at the line. In The Odyssey, there are clearly 3 sequences that showcases what Nolan is capable of had he had the chance to do a horror film. The first one being the Cyclops. And then there's a character that is played by Samantha Morton. And then the third one being the underworld sequence that I lightly addressed earlier. How they got to play with the shadows and the sound design during the Cyclops set piece was undeniably nightmarish. And then the introduction to Samantha Morton's character was rather effective with the way that, I don't know, it made my stomach turn, it made my skin crawl. I still don't know how they did that without CGI. It was kind of traumatizing. And then there's this beautiful but terrifying shot of the way that when they go to the underworld, that this mountain of shades just emerge from the black sand. I mean, that was just really cool. When it comes to the structure of the script, Christopher Nolan is no stranger when it comes to nonlinear storytelling. So I was immediately locked into the characters, into the arcs that I was immediately dropped into the middle of. And upon my second viewing, I could kind of tell, like, on my coworker's face that within the first 20 minutes, they were lost. And when it comes to the fall of Troy, with that taking place as, you know, the first event that happens chronologically, you are given that in portions throughout the entire runtime, where it is an event that is not fully realized until we get to the third act. The treacherous journey that Odysseus and his men attempt to make back home is presented in flashbacks, and it is never a dull moment. Even when the movie cuts back to the more dialogue-driven scenes with Tom Holland, Anne Hathaway, and Robert Pattinson, there is never a reference or a slice of information that I could probably miss or run to the bathroom to without them setting up a cascade of consequences to come. Getting into the talent here, now I'm not gonna lie, when I first heard that the role of Odysseus was going to Matt Damon, I thought that they could have done better with someone who wasn't already a big A-list movie star, but come to find out, he surprised the heck out of me. Now, I can certainly see Anne Hathaway and Tom Holland getting nominated for next year's Oscars because the more emotional moments and scenes that they got to wield here were very powerful and moving. Robert Pattinson is having a year. I mean, he's in so many roles, but for this one in particular, he is a conniving snake. And for someone to be tackling a spectrum of range, he just somehow manages to make this one particular role want me to slap him across the face. I also want to give a really big shout out amongst the rest of the entire cast ensemble, John Leguizamo, Samantha Morton, and Himesh Patel for their outstanding supporting roles and performances here. Getting into my mixed to nitpicky opinions, the modern dialect was definitely a choice where we're so used to hearing a lot of British accents and Shakespearean-like phrases in period pieces. And here, there was definitely these contemporary grammar deliveries and terms such as Pattinson saying daddy, where it didn't necessarily break the immersion for me. It wasn't as jarring. You know, at first I was forgiving with the appearance of the sirens being kept at a minimum, where they were pretty much ominous figures in the distance, keeping that mystique just as effective as it was chilling. But once we got to the one monster, Scylla, the six-headed sea creature, I was rather disappointed because it happened so quickly that we don't even get a full minute of its appearance, and good luck explaining that to someone like me, who has not read the original source material, what the heck that was. I had to go do research. I do feel like Charlize Theron's role as Calypso should have been much bigger. I mean, you're gonna cast an actress like that, as well as the role she plays is really integral, especially that she is a deity. And I felt like with the various amount of iterations that I've either read or have seen on screen, it felt very tamed. Now, when it comes down to the movie earning an R rating by the MPAA, I do feel like it doesn't necessarily match up to the quality of scale as something that you would get from a Ridley Scott epic. As much as I praise the cinematography and the editing, I do feel like the sections of combat would have benefited a little more had they spared a few more seconds on the carnage and even the budget for blood. This is a hard PG-13 movie at best. Even Matt Reeves' The Batman goes a little harder than this one. Overall, I forgot to add that Christopher Nolan definitely struck gold when he got to work with Ludwig Göransson once again, who's a three-time Academy Award-winning composer, and he got to do this without an orchestra, developing the soundtrack around actual Greek instruments like the lyre, bronze gongs, and an Allah's flute. And this may not be the most favorite interpretation or iteration of the Odyssey for everyone, but it's different. It's different in a way where it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it also keeps the original moral of the story. This is a confident and monumental masterpiece that deserves to be seen on the most titanical format available. This may not be Christopher Nolan's best movie, but it is certainly one of the best pictures of the year. Well, alright guys, that's all I got to share about that movie. Go ahead and check it out if you want to. Look forward to more reviews. I am Jaren Agbanawag, and I want to thank you guys again for taking some time out of your day to hear me talk some movies. I'll see you guys at the theater. Meanwhile, take care.